If you've sent out 200 applications this month and heard nothing back, it's easy to think the job market hates you. It doesn't. Your resume is getting filtered out before a human ever opens it, while 5 entire industries are so short-staffed that hiring managers are approving people the same day they walk in the door. Some of these pay into 6 figures. Some are fully remote. None require a specific degree or years of experience, and most you can walk into within weeks. By the end of this video, you'll know which door is open for you. I am Dre, and before I built anything online, I spent years inside recruiting and compensation planning, sitting in on hiring committees and watching requisitions sit open past their deadline. Here is something most people never see from the outside. When a role stays unfilled too long, the standards attached to it quietly drop. The degree requirement becomes a nice to have. The years of experience becomes negotiable. The interview turns into more of a formality than a filter. That is how staffing math works once demand outruns supply. So today, I am walking you through 5 roles where that exact math is playing out right now. What they actually pay, how fast you can realistically get in, and where the catch usually shows up. Because there is almost always a catch somewhere. This is general information based on patterns I have seen in hiring work, not a guarantee for your specific situation. So confirm requirements in your own state before you apply anywhere. If that sounds useful, hit subscribe and tap the bell. And let us get into it. Here is the pattern I want you to notice as we go through this list. The jobs that fill up fast are the ones everyone already knows about. The jobs that stay empty are the ones nobody thinks to look for, either because they sound strange, they sound unpleasant, or they sound too specialized for someone without a background in it. Every role on this list falls into that gap, and once you see the pattern, you will start noticing it everywhere else too. Let us start with one of the stranger ones, because it tends to wake people up. Companies in the food, fragrance, and consumer goods industries employ people whose entire job is to smell or taste products before they ever reach a shelf. The formal title is usually sensory panelist, and the more casual version people use is odor tester. Your nose becomes the quality control department. Now, the misconception is that this sounds made up, like something a low-effort list would throw in just to pad the count. It is not. Postings for sensory panel work show up regularly on major job boards, and they are real, current openings, not an urban legend. Think of it less like a job and more like calibrating an instrument. A cheap smoke detector goes off randomly and eventually gets its battery pulled out. A calibrated one catches exactly what it is supposed to every time without false alarms. Companies pay for a human who has been calibrated the same way. And no, you do not need a chemistry degree or some rare genetic gift. Panels typically screen applicants for a normal, consistent sense of smell or taste, then train them on the specific vocabulary and reference sense used in that industry. Here is roughly how the pay tends to break down, and these figures shift by region and employer, so treat them as a general range rather than a promise. Entry-level panel work often starts close to minimum wage while you are still training and being screened. Once you are certified and consistently reliable, pay climbs, and specialized panelists working for larger fragrance or food companies can move into a comfortable full-time salary, with the most experienced testers occasionally crossing into 6 figures depending on the industry. To soils, search sensory panelist, odor tester, or taste tester on the major job boards. Look specifically at flavor and fragrance companies, food manufacturers, and consumer product testing firms, and expect an initial smell or taste acuity screening as part of the interview rather than a resume review. There is usually no degree requirement listed for entry-level panels. If you have a naturally sensitive nose or palate and you are tired of that being useless on a resume, this is where it stops being useless. Now let us move from the strange end of the list to the serious end, because this next one has some of the best upside here. Every large AI model you have ever used runs inside a building that generates a staggering amount of heat. And if the cooling system fails, hardware worth billions can be damaged in minutes. That is why data center cooling technicians, especially those trained on liquid cooling systems, have become one of the most quietly desperate hiring categories in the trades right now. Staffing industry research has repeatedly flagged skilled trade roles like HVAC technicians as taking longer to fill than many office roles, largely because training pipelines have not kept pace with how fast this infrastructure is being built. Think of it like a gold rush. Everyone fixates on the people building the models, the engineers and the researchers. But the people who quietly did well were the ones keeping the water running and the equipment cool. In this boom, the cooling technician is that person. The misconception here is that the trades are already saturated and everyone is rushing in. In practice, the general HVAC pipeline and the specialized data center cooling pipeline are two very different things, and the specialized side is still thin. On pay, general HVAC technicians often land somewhere in the low to mid $70,000 range annually, depending on region and experience. And technicians who pick up data center or liquid cooling specialization typically sit above that general average, because the skill is scarcer and the cost of a failure is so much higher. To start, look into an HVAC program at a community college or trade school, most of which run under a year, and get your EPA 608 certification, which is legally required to handle refrigerants. From there, look specifically for postings mentioning data center, mission critical, or liquid cooling experience, and apply directly to the mechanical contractors who service that equipment, not just general HVAC employers. The caveat here is real. This work can have volunteered physical strain, unusual hours, and being on call, so it is not a fit for everyone. But if you can handle that trade-off, the hiring gap works heavily in your favor right now. If you are finding this useful so far, this is a good spot to hit subscribe, because the next two are the ones people underestimate the most. Let us talk about an industry that has one advantage almost nothing else on this list has: permanence. Crematory and funeral service operators run the equipment and processes involved in death care. And unlike most industries, this one does not slow down when the economy does. People stop buying houses, stop buying cars, stop eating out during a downturn. Death care does not follow that pattern. And it is not just stable, it is short-staffed, because a large share of funeral directors and operators are aging toward retirement faster than new people are entering the field. The misconception is that this requires years of mortuary science education. Most operator-level positions require a short certification course rather than a multi-year degree, and many employers will train you directly on the equipment, because the alternative is leaving a role unfilled. On pay, entry-level crematory and death care roles often average somewhere in the mid-40s annually, with a typical range from the high 30s into the mid-50s. And this is generally an entry point into work that can pay more as you move into funeral direction or management. To start, look at funeral home and crematory openings on general job boards, as well as industry-specific job boards run by death care associations. Check your state-specific certification requirements, since they vary, and walk in with a calm, steady temperament, because that quality alone puts you ahead of a lot of applicants in a field most people do not consider. It is a heavier subject than the rest of this list, I know that, but if steady demand and job security matter more to you than glamour, this is one of the strongest options here. Here is one that sounds almost too risky to be real. Hospitals are hiring people to monitor at-risk patients through live video feeds, watching for falls or dangerous movements and alerting nursing staff before something happens. It is usually called a virtual patient monitor or a telesitter, and a single person can often watch a dozen or more patients at once from one station. Your instinct might be that hospitals would never hand something this serious to someone watching a screen remotely. But this role exists because a dedicated in-person sitter for every at-risk patient is not staffable at the scale hospitals actually need. Think of it like a lifeguard stand, except instead of watching one pool, you are watching a wall of screens. And the whistle is a direct call button to the nurse's station. On the misconception people often raise, many postings list patient care or certified nursing assistant experience as preferred rather than required, and hospitals frequently train new hires directly on their monitoring software rather than requiring outside certification. On pay, this role often runs close to the high teens per hour, with a typical range moving into the low 20s depending on the hospital system and region. And it is frequently part-time or remote, which makes it one of the more approachable entry points into healthcare without needing clinical training first. To start, search Virtual Patient Monitor or Telesitter directly through hospital system career pages as well as general job boards, and expect the application process to focus more on attentiveness and reliability than on your resume history. One caution here. This work requires sustained focus for long stretches, so it rewards people who can stay alert during quiet periods, not just react well to sudden ones. Last one, and it might be the strangest use of an ordinary skill on this entire list. Medical schools and healthcare training programs pay people to act as patients, following a script of symptoms and a backstory, so that student clinicians can practice diagnosing someone before they ever treat a real patient. The formal title is standardized patient. The reason this role exists is simple once you think about it. In most jobs, a mistake is inconvenient. In medicine, a mistake can be fatal. So training programs build in a safe space to make those mistakes first, with an actor instead of a real patient. Think of it like a stunt double, except instead of taking a physical hit for a film, you are taking on a diagnosis for someone else's education. The misconception is that you need acting training to do this. Programs typically coach you directly on the case and give feedback after each session. And older adults are often specifically recruited for this work because training programs need age-realistic patients for students to practice with. On pay, headline averages for this field can be misleading because they often blend in full-time program coordinator salaries. The actual hourly gig work for standardized patients more commonly runs somewhere in the high teens to mid-20s per hour. To start, search standardized patient along with your nearest medical or health science school, since most run their own hiring pages directly, and also check general job boards for remote or hybrid opportunities, which do exist in this space. If you are a retiree or a career changer looking for flexible, part-time work that still feels meaningful, this is worth a serious look. Now here is the bigger pattern underneath all five, worth sitting with. Every one of these roles exists in the gap between what people assume is desirable and what is actually in demand. The jobs everyone already wants stay competitive. The jobs people overlook because they sound strange, uncomfortable, or too specialized are often the ones with the least competition and the most room to move up quickly. That does not mean any of these are easy, and it does not mean every posting you find will match exactly what I described, since requirements shift by state, by employer, and by local licensing rules. But the underlying mechanism holds across all of them. When an employer cannot fill a role fast enough, the requirements soften and the door opens wider than most people assume. So if you started this video assuming that landing a job quickly meant settling for something you would not want, I hope this changed that a little. These are not consolation prizes. Several pay well. Several are flexible or remote. And every one is a real door currently propped open because employers cannot fill it fast enough. The people who move on these fastest are not the most qualified people watching this. They are simply the ones willing to look somewhere other than the obvious place. If one of these 5 stood out to you, let me know which one in the comments, because it genuinely shapes what I cover next. And if you want the follow-up to this one, I am putting together a video on the hidden trades and healthcare roles that never make it onto lists like this, because there are a lot more than 5 of them. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you catch that one when it goes up. I will see you in the next video.